America has towns that were not built like normal towns. They did not slowly grow around a river, a crossroads, a courthouse, or a downtown. They were built because one company needed workers. The company built the factory, then it built the houses, then the streets, the stores, the schools, the churches, the parks, and sometimes even the rules. These were company towns, places where your job, your home, your rent, your groceries, and your entire community could all be tied to the same employer. And depending on where you lived, that could mean a clean, planned, almost utopian community. Or it could mean living inside a corporate cage. Because when one company owns the job, the house, the store, and the land, you do not just work for the company, you live inside it. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, American industry was exploding. Steel mills, coal mines, railroads, lumber camps, textile factories, and manufacturing plants were spreading across the country. But there was a problem. A lot of these jobs were not located in comfortable, established cities. Mines were in the mountains, mills were near rivers, steel plants were built where land, rail, water, and raw materials made sense. So companies needed to attract workers and keep them close. The solution was simple: build the town yourself. To the company, this was efficient. Workers would live near the factory, families would settle down, the workforce would be stable, the town could be designed to prevent overcrowding, disease, and disorder. But there was another benefit: control. A company town solved one problem for workers, where to live, and created one massive problem: the boss followed you home. One of the most famous examples was Pullman, Illinois. In the 1880s, George Pullman built a model town near Chicago for workers making his luxury railroad sleeping cars. And on the surface, Pullman looked impressive. The town had brick row houses, parks, public buildings, clean streets, and an organized layout. Compared to the crowded industrial slums of the time, it looked almost futuristic. But Pullman was not just a town. It was a company town. The company owned the homes. The company controlled the rents. The company controlled much of daily life. Workers could live in a clean, planned community, but they were still living under the shadow of the same employer that paid their wages. And when the economy crashed in the 1890s, Pullman cut wages. But rents did not fall the same way. That tension helped trigger one of the most important labor conflicts in American history: the Pullman strike. The model town had revealed its central flaw. It looked like a community, but it functioned like a system of control. And Pullman was only one version of this idea. In Pennsylvania, the town of Hershey showed the softer, more polished version of the company town. Milton Hershey did not just build a chocolate factory, he built an entire community around it. Homes, schools, parks, public spaces, and amenities were all part of the vision. Hershey was designed to be cleaner, healthier, and more pleasant than the grim industrial towns many workers knew. And unlike some company towns, Hershey did not become famous mainly for exploitation or collapse. It became a brand. That is what makes Hershey so interesting. It shows that company towns were not always ugly. Sometimes they were beautiful. Sometimes they were genuinely well planned. Sometimes they gave workers access to things they might not have had elsewhere. But the basic question was still there: how much of a town should one company shape? Then there is Vandergrift, Pennsylvania. Vandergrift was built around steel, but it was not just a random mill town. It was planned with intention. Instead of a chaotic industrial settlement, Vandergrift was designed to feel orderly, efficient, and livable. Its streets curved with the landscape. Its layout reflected the idea that a better designed town could create better workers, fewer labor problems, and a more stable community. That sounds almost noble, but it also shows how company town planning could blend beauty with control. The architecture said community. The ownership said productivity. Because even when the design was attractive, the purpose was still industrial. The town existed because the company needed labor close to the factory. And no American company town shows scale like Gary, Indiana. Gary was not a small mining camp or a tiny factory village. It was an entire industrial city built by U.S. Steel. It was created to serve one enormous purpose: steel production. The location was strategic. It had access to the Great Lakes, railroads, and the massive industrial network of the Midwest. Gary grew into one of America's great steel cities, but that also made it vulnerable. Because when a city is built around one industry, its fate becomes tied to that industry. For decades, steel made Gary powerful. Then, automation, global competition, suburbanization, and deindustrialization changed everything. The jobs disappeared, the population fell, buildings emptied, the tax base weakened. Gary became one of the clearest examples of what happens when a place built around one industrial engine has to survive after that engine slows down. Gary was not just a city with steel. Gary was a steel mill that became a city. And when the steel economy changed, the city had to absorb the damage. But the darkest version of the company town was often found in coal country. Across Appalachia, companies built mining towns in isolated valleys and mountain regions. Workers lived in company-owned houses. They bought goods at company stores. In some places, they were paid in company scrip instead of normal money, forcing them to spend wages back into the company system. That is where the company town could become less like urban planning and more like a trap. Because if the company owns your house, your store, and your paycheck, quitting is not simple. Losing your job can mean losing your home. Complaining can mean losing everything. And in isolated coal towns, there were not always other employers nearby. The company was not just part of the economy. The company was the economy. That is why company towns have such a complicated legacy. Some were planned with real care. Some had parks, schools, decent housing, and a sense of identity that still survives today. But others were designed to extract labor as efficiently as possible, while keeping workers dependent on the same company that controlled their lives. The company town could be a community. It could also be a machine. And then came the cruelest part. When the factory closed, the mine shut down, or the industry moved away, the company could leave. But the town remained. The houses remained. The roads remained. The people remained. The schools, churches, and neighborhoods remained. Only now, the original reason for the town's existence was gone.